So today, we have lots of alternate faces. But you have name tags, which is special, so. All right, so it's Mr. Rudolph for Miss Acton.
Here.
Miss Wong for Miss McNulty. Here. Mr. Hanson?
Who am I here for?
I think you're here for yourself. Mr. Levy. Mr. Madoon.
Present.
Mr. Linnell.
Present.
Mr. Stitchett. And I'm here as well, so we hope you have a quorum. Craig, would you mind making the public involvement?
All AMATS meetings are open to the public. We have a business item, a presentation by staff or consultants. At that point, the committee will be given a chance to discuss it, and then after that, the public will be invited to comment.
Thank you. So first item before us is approval of the agenda.
Second.
Moved from Mr. Rudolph. I heard Mr. Hanson first.
I was second.
What?
I was second.
Well,
You're
it
the
was the
second.
first second. I heard you was the first second. Are there any opposed? All right. The agenda is approved. We also have a set of meeting minutes before us for the 13th of June. Let the record show that Mr. Post has arrived in place for Mr. Van Hoek. Or item 4. Supposed to think this was a really long time ago. What has happened? Do I have a motion?
Second.
Moved by Mr. Lindemood, seconded by Mr. Linnell. Are there any objections? No? All right, and those meeting minutes are approved. Moving right along, we are on our first action item then, item 5A, which is the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee appointments. We have 2 of them, I believe,
We
correct?
do. We have 2 seats that are vacant. We have, I believe we have a public seat, and then we have our, I think it's called the social services seat. That was the seat that Mr. Fields had, and the public seat was Dr. Thompson had. And so we are fortunate that we have 2 folks that are interested in serving, that are active in non-motorized activities. And I know one of them is here today. We have Chelsea Warballer, who is here. But those are the 2 suggested appointments that both are interested in serving. We'd be lucky to have them both jump in on the BPAC.
Any questions from the committee?
Who's serving in which position?
Chelsea would be the public seat. I don't know how to pronounce her last name correctly. Lindsay Hydu, maybe? She is with the Alaska Community Foundation, and so that would fit under the social services. And that's always been a challenge with the Phil, so we're lucky that she's available.
Questions? Chelsea, since you're in the audience, do you want to take this opportunity to say anything?
I don't think so. I know most of you.
Yeah.
I'm on the Bike Anchorage Board. I'm also on the PTAB, finishing up my master's in public health, looking at active transportation and public transit.
I guess, are there any questions or comment, well, I just say any comments from the public?
James Garzik, DOT. I just wanted to ask one question for you, Craig, about the makeup of the BPAC. About what's the percentage of people on BPAC that are also on the with Bike Anchorage?
I believe there is a bicycle organization seat, and that one right now is currently filled by a gentleman with bike anchorage. And then Chelsea also happens to be on that entity. I don't know anyone else who might be, off the top of my head.
Well, Lindsay is.
Volunteer.
She's no longer on our board.
No longer on board, okay. Okay. Any other comments? Hearing none, the matter lies with committee.
Move to approve and forward to the policy committee for approval.
I'll second it.
I'm going with Mr. Hanson making the motion. Mr. Lincoln seconding. Are there any objections? Hearing none, that we are so moved. You have 2 more weeks to wait before you know your final status. All right, moving right along. We have item 5B before us, which is the operating agreement update.
So at when we had our certification reviewed by Federal Highways and Federal Transit Administration, we had extensive discussion on the TIP and the major amendments and administrative modifications that we make, and some confusion regarding that. And so, and there's also a memorandum of understanding that is out there between DOT and the feds. And so in an effort to help clear up some of the confusion and make it a little more concise on what we have staff has drafted up this operating agreement amendment, which would clarify what is an amendment and what is a minor or administrative modification. Basically, what I did is I took the language directly out of the Code of Federal Regulations and adopted that just with a little bit of extra flavor in there for us to make it as simple as possible. Typically, the feds will say, for example, with the TIP, they say you need to have some sort of competitive process to decide what projects you're going to do. They don't tell you have to have these criteria and you have to have something that relates to the federal factor, so on and so forth. They just want you to have a process, and it needs to be defendable and all that sort of stuff. So I figured the easiest thing to do is just take their language that they have in the CFRs related to major amendment, administrative modification, and just use that. And so what I've done is plug that into the operating agreement, so it basically says exactly what's in the Code of Federal Regulations. The only thing I really added was, they talk about major amendments being something that has a major change to a project, or if you're adding or deleting projects. Now, as you know, from Mr. Laurie's description in his preliminary report, was we've been adding and deleting projects that weren't part of the AMATS allocation. We've been doing those as administrative modifications, and we've been doing that for at least the 16 years I've been doing this, and they've approved them all. And that's not how that's supposed to work. It's supposed to be anytime, no matter what allocation it is, whether it's the national highway system that the state controls or the railroad's transit money, it all has to be an amendment if it's a new project. So the only thing I did really was to add in some language about a major change would be something that has a change greater than 75% of the total project cost. In my work to follow the policy committee's direction about updating the new criteria, I looked at probably 100 different MPOs criteria around the country, and I just happened to also be looking at their differences between major amendments and administrative modifications, and I found a couple of different MPOs that have that 75% greater threshold. Chattanooga is one of them that uses that 75% threshold. The idea is, let's try to do what we can to continue to be able to deliver our program. And if every time we have to do a major amendment, it takes a chunk of time, whereas administrative modification, like the one we have on today's agenda, we have the TAC meeting and then we have the policy committee meeting. And a major amendment right now means we have to get on the Assembly's agenda, and that could take 4 or 5 months. Then we have to go do our public process, which is another 2 months. And then it has the 2 to 3 month process to be incorporated into the STIP. And all of those things make it so you probably have time to do 1 amendment a year, and that is going to make it challenging to deliver the program. So this is an attempt to say, unless we're really changing things a lot, or unless we're adding new projects in, we're pretty much going to do administrative modifications. Now again, anytime we're adding a new project, whether it's for the railroad or for the state under NHS or HSIP, those are going to be still major amendments. That's going to be how that works. But everything else that we do inside of our allocation, it should be okay to be able to do it as administrative modifications, unless it's a significant change over adding or deleting a project. That's the kind of language here that I was trying to go with. There is one change on page 3 of this, well, it's page 14, but it's the 3rd page of the paper there, that Mark caught. It starts, the second paragraph, it starts administrative modifications. It should say administrative modifications to the AMATS tip, not MTP. So that was, again, just a cut and paste that I missed. And that's basically it, trying to keep our program moving so we can try and not take 10 to 15 years to deliver a project.
So it also looks like, just so I'm clear when I'm looking at the changes, the amendments to the MTP in the same section, and now you've broken them down. So that there's a section
Yeah.
about amendments to the MTP, and then amendments to the TIP.
And in my time here, we did one amendment to the MTP. That's the only time we've ever done it, 2009 timeframe. So that just doesn't happen as often with the MTP.
Okay. And related to, I know one of the conversations we had last month related to kind of those projects that are not within the AMATS allocation. One of the things that John Lori kind of said is that you could just have the dollar amount with what the funding is, and then possibly have the list of projects as an appendix.
Yeah.
So that if the project lists are changing, that's not, I mean, if it's an appendix and just the project list is changing, that's not a major amendment.
Right,
correct?
there's language in the code related to grouped projects. You can do group projects and projects that are usually smaller in scope. I didn't get the sense that they would be okay if we just did the NHS as a group project, because, those are 20 to 30 to 40 million dollar projects, and we're just taking this one out and having a new one in, but that probably wouldn't fly, but HSFP would probably work. It's possible that the railroad would work. I don't know if you have another program of projects, but you do, right?
Sure.
Because I know that transit, this serves as their program of projects, so they don't have it usually listed elsewhere. So,
Yeah,
and it needs to be listed somewhere.
We've got 3 or 4 different colors of money that we deal with, of which, this is one.
Okay.
And so, we've got a 5-year program and stuff like that changes every couple of months. And we'll sit there when we're working on capital, we'll sit there and just look for the ones that fit whichever color of money works best.
So I think this is step 1. So this will really solve our issue with our allocation, mostly in most big projects. When we get our final certification review, which is theoretically going to come out next month from the Fed, hopefully they'll have enough color in there so we'll be able to determine what we can do with group projects and whether or not we can do group projects for the railroad, transit, or whatever. We'll have to do the full thing on the table. If we can do a group project and then have the projects in the appendix, that would really help continue to make sure we can deliver the program. The projects will be still there, we will still be able to see them, but if they'll accept it that way, we'll know. But we don't want to take that step until they give us the final review.
I'm wondering if we're a little bit ahead of ourselves and we're still expecting this final certification, final review and guidance right now. Whether or not there might be issues in that we might want to go ahead and consider and kind of roll into this. because it really would be nice to be able to go ahead and keep that flexibility that you're speaking of, that you're trying to describe. Actually, I think that this is a great effort. I think that this is actually something that we've actually kind of wanted to see for a while. For a while, I think the operating agreement's been out of sync with the FAST Act. But we did just see it this week, and so I guess I'm a little bit concerned about the kind of the law of unintended consequences, so to speak. We are going to be asking it's the governor that actually signs this, and I think before we really kind of go ahead and forward it on to the policy committee and to the ultimately to the governor for signature and the mayor, we want to get it right. We don't want to have to go back and kind of request another signature again. So I guess I'm advocating actually for waiting a little longer, for going ahead and having more time to go ahead and work it out internally at the staff level too, because we have some things that we also may want to kind of go ahead and coordinate with that are guiding documents within AMATS, like the trigger events or the policy and procedures, what it is that the PC approves and the technical advisory committee approves. So I guess I'm asking for more time.
I would echo that. We're going to try annual review here in 3 weeks. And I think FDA is going to visit you when they're done with us or before us. I'm not sure which, but it sounds like there's opportunities for other things that may have to get looked at. And probably need to wait and see what else comes up.
Well, FDA did visit us. They're in the same view. This was posted last Thursday. We always have to have business items posted in advance. This portion of it is something that, again, we've been doing for 16 years, the 16 years that I've been here, and I would assume before that, incorrectly, and so that part really needs to be tightened up regardless of what the review says. It doesn't need to happen this month, it doesn't need to happen this week. I think it's ready to go. But that's up to the committee.
I guess my question, since the final review report hasn't come out, this isn't a corrective action that we've been given to date. I guess my question really is there any risk that we would have in delaying a decision on this at this time?
No, I don't think there's any risk. I think it just would be it would show a really good sign in the feds, because this is something we've been doing wrong for, whatever the review says, this needs to be changed like this regardless, so.
Is there any other questions from the committee? Mr. Hanson?
This had nothing to do with this. It was somebody reading on that, and it was going through the section 5 up here, and it talks about the different committees and stuff. It seems like it's all just kind of random thrown together. It talks about the policy and technical down below. Then they throw in the assembly along with some of the other advisory. I'm not sure that's the appropriate place. And then you go to, you talk about the different committees, and right in the middle it talks about, well, the metro planning area under 23, which is not one of the committees. So it seems like it's not in good order. If you understand what I'm saying.
I do. All I can tell you is that
it's probably
unchanged since it was first drafted by Mr. Wilbur in 2000.
Well, then we can plan plans.
I can't.
It just,
Yeah, I don't want to get inside that guy's mind. It does seem a little odd to me. I just haven't touched it because that's where it was when I got here.
It's like the union contracts. I've been in union contract negotiations, and there's certain language that I think just needs to be tweaked. And they're just like, if it's not broke, don't touch it, because then you'll have to renegotiate everything. And this is something that's going to be going to the governor.
That language-
Reorganization. I mean, something just to consider, because if you do changes to everything has to be probably by the Attorney General's office, more than likely, because almost everything goes through legal. So, anyway.
Yeah, I guess I would concur that we want to keep this, and I was sincere in the sense that I really think that this is a good effort. This is something we need to do. But I think, I want to reiterate actually, Stephanie, your point that kind of keeping it tight, within, kind of what needs to be changed, I think is a good strategy. I think once you start kind of opening things up, and looking at signatures from the mayor and the governor, you may be surprised as to what possibly might come out of that. But some of the questions that I have is, we talked about 75%, but we oftentimes have projects that are really rather small. $100,000 study. A $100,000 study goes up to a $200,000 study that would require an amendment under this. And in most other instances, they actually have a dollar value as well, So we can tweak this now at the table right now, but I think really it's important enough for something that we're going to be requesting, signature from the governor that we get it right the first time.
I'm not sure this is, the original document is signed by the governor, but if you look at the original document, it's signed by Knowles and Word, so, the mayor has never signed any changes to this. I don't,
Okay.
you guys sent it to the governor, that was news.
Okay, well, you do have a signature block.
Yeah, that's just from the original version that Knowles and correction I just gave you the last version, but, maybe you,
Okay.
I don't know where it goes when it leaves my office and it goes to the state and say, hey, here's something that was passed, here's the official version of it.
Still, I think, there's an overriding agreement. I think, Chair, excuse me for interrupting. I think it's worth going ahead and taking a little bit extra time just to make sure that we all feel good with it. I'm just concerned about that. I'm kind of doing a knee-jerk reaction to it now, and I feel more comfortable approving it after having thought about all the potential.
Any other comments?
That's not it. Like, we've been around for 16 years, wasn't it?
I can actually answer that. So, Aaron O'Gannon with AMATS. So there is an actual risk we take by not moving forward with this right away, and that's not getting our admin mods approved by DOT or incorporated into the STIP. They have been, headquarters DOT has been very concerned with the way we've been doing things in the past, and they have pushed back and delayed previous admin mods saying, okay, as long as you're working on updating these, we'll go ahead and approve the past ones. But any future ones are not guaranteed to move forward if we don't have this in place. And as somebody who likes to keep the program going and make sure we don't lose our federal funds or have it go back to the state, so AMATS loses it, it'd be kind of nice if we could get something in place that we can work with and then update it as needed. My read through the operating agreement doesn't say that it has to go to the governor or the mayor for approval, that it's subject to the policy committee approval. My understanding is that a redemonstration or a redesignation would have to go to the governor and the mayor for approval, because that's a significant change of the policy committee board. But if somebody finds something different, please let me know. I do have a couple of things, but I don't know if this is the right time to mention it or wait until you go to comments to the public.
Well, I wait till comments to the public,
Okay.
please. Are there any other comments? Clear the point out?
Just a question, if I could. The admin modification that's on the agenda today, is that able to move forward without the change to the operating agreement?
I believe so, but I haven't had a discussion with headquarters to know if they'll.
We're going to try. My recommendation is get it approved first at the policy committee, then get the operating agreement changes done, order them appropriately, and kind of go from there.
So if DOT is asking for us to wait, and then DOT is also saying we won't approve it until you change this, has Central Region talked to headquarters and made sure that waiting is okay?
No. Honestly, I was kind of alerted to this today. So that's part of my reluctance right now. It's just, quite frankly, that we're not, I'm not sure that I feel comfortable enough with it to go ahead and tell headquarters what my recommendation would be.
So, can I clarify that? When you say that you don't know what your recommendation to headquarters would be, in fact of like supporting what this change is and clarifications of the difference between an amendment, a major amendment, and an administrative modification?
Well, whether or not, this is something that, I feel like in final form, I mean, I totally support the concept of going ahead and making, the amendment process quicker, easier, less cumbersome, and by just to clarify, by making most things an admin modification. I'm just wondering if this is kind of the best language to cover all those things. And I think it would be awkward to kind of go back and be doing it twice, just with even if it was a minor change or something. I think it would be kind of awkward. We haven't done it for a while, and I'd rather just go ahead and do it right once. So my overall thoughts about this is that it's a very good thing. Just don't want to do it twice.
Any other comments? Mr. Anthony?
As far as signatures, I was going through this, and I'm not an attorney, but I think the mayor, I'm not even sure he has the authority to sign this, maybe the manager and the governor have to sign this. This is any amendment on this is an amendment to the contract that those two officers signed. So in my understanding, that's something we need to talk to legal about. I'm not sure, like I said, I'm not even sure that the mayor by code has the authority to enter into the agreement. There's certain things that different, most of it's delegated into with the managers.
Yeah, I will tell you that we've amended this 2 or 3 times since I've been here, and section 19 says the agreement may be amended only in writing and must be done prior to undertaking changes or work resulting therefrom. Such amendments are subject to approval by the AMATS Policy Committee, FHWA, and FTA. And so those other prior amendments, they have not gone down to legal and not had the meeting manager sign or anyone sign it. It's just been, this is an operating agreement between the municipality of Anchorage and the state of Alaska regarding AMATS.
Yeah, it's an agreement
So,
between the two agencies.
yeah, and it was signed originally by Knowles and Ward.
No, I can see
So
that.
that's-
I'm just
It's
making a
never
comment,
changed.
I'm just not, my experience, the two people signing the agreement in the first place, to make an amendment, they have to agree to make the amendment, unless they have designated somebody else. If it's, the mayor has the authority, then he can designate the manager, he can designate you, whoever he wants to. He has that authority, but I don't think that's been done.
It has been.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
The mayor sits on the policy committee, and then the DOT representative on there is a designee of the governor through the commissioner. So they are the designees to make changes to this agreement.
Or they've been given that authority under the, from the both of those parties? I'm just not sure that that's correct. I'm just questioning.
All I know is that the original operating agreement went through extensive legal, and that's how this section 19 amendment came out. It said amendments are subject to approval by the policy committee, not by the governor, not by the mayor, but the policy committee.
Oh, yeah.
So
Well,
I'm not a lawyer either.
No, I mean, and I don't want to delve into this, but really it does say at the beginning part of it, when it talks about the MPO being designated, that in 1976, the governor of the state of Alaska designated the municipality of Anchorage as the MPO and identified the AMATS Policy Committee as the then existing policy body providing the direction of transportation planning in the MPO in accordance with federal law. So that does sound like the policy committee was designated by the governor as the policy body. But
But that's a different thing than entering into a contract. You got the state and the community entering into a contract, which this is, what we call it, agreement or understanding or what, doesn't make any difference. But the two parties that signed it in the first place are the mayor and the governor. Right or wrong, but they signed it. Now, whether they should be, give somebody else designation to, and the contract has to be amended, in writing, which means somebody from both sides has to sign it. Whether it's manager, mayor, governor.
Yeah, the original
commissioner.
agreement, I would agree that someone from both sides has to sign the original agreement, but.
No, not just the original agreement, but any amendment, it has to be in writing.
We do have the
Yeah.
policy committee sign off on these things. We have a signature page that we give the policy committee, that the policy committee chair, and then the members who were there that day signs it.
My opinion is that that's separate from this agreement.
I don't think there are any lawyers in the room.
Nope, so hopefully not.
Kind of spinning our wheels.
Yeah, I know. Any other comments? Are there any comments from the public? Ask something. I didn't say, I know. You were first.
Okay.
Police station 8300.
John Weddleton. Excuse me. If there's a hurry on this, so your proposal would be to postpone it to the next TAC meeting? Because if there's a hurry, if you worked out amendments to this amendment, ran them through Craig, and he brought them to, I think, next week's policy, we could go through them. And if they were too much for us to handle, then we could send it back to the TAC and be on your schedule. But if they were pretty simple, reasonable, I expect they would be, then maybe we could just approve it at the PC level and stay on the current schedule. And then we could, and that gives us a week anyway to send Gary's point to legal. Just find out then. I mean, it's worth asking.
Yeah.
And I would support that, if not for the fact that I heard potentially that there might be issues with FHWA that we might want to consider as part of the training or certification. So I'm not sure if there's a benefit. I guess, and that was me just listening to you, Craig, if I misconstrued that in some way.
I have no idea what else they might say. I mean, the main thing was this tightening of the language relating to amendments versus administrative modifications. The other stuff that I talked about in regards to pooled projects, that's something that, I don't know if they're even going to address. They talked about it a bit, and they said, it's available in the federal law right now. Other MPOs around the country take advantage of that. There are a lot of them they saw that are using those right now. So we just haven't done that, partly because we've been doing our amendments incorrectly. So I think I'm not going to guess what the feds are going to say if they're. And they did say, I think we asked them specifically, and they said, probably they'll have it in August, but it could be September. And so if we wait that long, we'd stand, they may not, I don't know what but headquarters will do with this administrative modification. They may say, you haven't changed anything, you're still not following the rules, so we're not going to approve this until you get your amendment, your agreement changed. There's some projects in here as we get towards the end of the fiscal year, we're going to have a lot of them that we're going to lose a lot of money. There's a PEL in there for $5 million that is kind of waiting, and we don't have a live tip where it's a hole.
Mr. Sargent?
I just wanted to add my 2 cents about the legal question. I think is very germane to this topic in that seeing how we don't seem to have a clear determination one way or the other, it would seem prudent to get a legal determination from either the MOA, the state, or both. And perhaps if you take the route to forward this to the PAC or the PC, maybe you phrase that as a condition of the legal standing of who approves it as part of that motion. Or if it's going to be held for a month, then that would offer plenty of time for that legal question to be answered. But regardless, I think that's a question that needs to be resolved before you can really do anything with this.
I think we can support the concept right now. Is there, excuse me, chair, please. Is there an opportunity to go ahead and meet with staff, maybe very early next week, to go ahead and just discuss this, and if there's any issues or things we might want to go ahead and modify and address, and maybe we can resolve the things then, if there's any issues or not. And maybe we would just kind of conceptually approve it today. That might be the option.
I would add, I'm not completely seeing the urgency in this insofar as, again, it's been wrong for 16 years. We know headquarters hasn't been pleased. It's been brought to our attention that we don't really have anything in writing specifically from FHWA. And we're trying to jam this through to get one administrative amendment done. We haven't talked to headquarters, but clearly I think we can demonstrate that we're working on correcting the problem if they've got an issue with this specific amendment. I believe everything that's within this specific amendment would be within whatever the changes are that we're contemplating right now. So I'm still lost. I'm still lost on the urgency, because right now we've got something that hasn't been fully vetted. We're reacting to something that hasn't necessarily been completely written down, and we're wondering whether we even have the authority to do it in the first place. So I agree with you. At the risk of doing this twice, why are we jumping through hoops now?
What I can say is, as Aaron pointed out, it took 3 or 4 extra months at headquarters when they looked at approving the tip, where they basically said, well, yeah, we're not going to approve this until you change some of these things in here. So we do run the very real risk of them getting this administrative modification that we're trying to get done today, so we can continue this program and not have a whole bunch of projects lapse. They may not approve it, because we don't have anything in our operating agreement that says, here's how we do administrative modifications versus major amendments. So that's, we try to deliver the program, and that is a real possibility.
Well,
So we basically said, we adopted your 2019 to 22 tip, but you got to change something before we adopt any amendments, any Madden mods. So this is.
And I am sympathetic to that. But at the same time, we go and we do a bunch of limbo stuff trying to get this before the policy committee, but make a bunch of amendments on the floor, and then we find out the governor and the mayor have to sign this. You think that's going to happen quickly?
All I can tell you is that the last 3 amendments to the operating agreement that we did not get signed by the mayor and or the governor. And that's because the MPO, the amendments to this are signed by the policy committee. They're agreed to by the policy committee. When MPOs were set up, they were designed to be this autonomous creature that's governing, a cooperative entity that decides these things. They're not designed to be the governor gets to decide how your TIP is set up. It's a cooperative entity. So we decide what's in our operating agreement unless it's a redesignation. And a redesignation is, well, we're going to add 3 or 4 members to our policy committee. We're going to add, whoever we want to add in there. When you do what this is, which is basically a minor amendment to our operating agreement, it's just agreed to by our governing body, because the policy committee is the MPO. You don't have to have staff for an MPO. You don't have to have a technical advisory committee for an MPO. You have to have a policy board, and that's it. And so that's what governs. This is the entity that decides. It's not the governor. It's not the mayor. It's not FHWA. It's this policy board. That's the MPO. And they decided, here's how we're going to do our amendments. I'm not a lawyer. I I don't know how quickly the State Department of Law reviews things, but I can tell you a month is not how quickly the Municipal Department of Law does things, not in my experience. So if we want to send this to the Department of Law to get their determination on it, we can be assured that we're at least a couple months before we can do an amendment that might pass muster with the Central Region. So
Greg, if I may.
the Technical Advisory Committee is willing to do whatever, or they're able to do whatever they want to take those chances, and I'm simply staff.
Mr. Amundson?
Jim Amundson, DOT. I can tell you that having been party to a couple of the discussions at headquarters, there is a genuine risk that if we don't move forward with this update to the agreement, it is very likely that the next amendment we send to them will not be processed through, and we will lose federal money this fiscal year. We do not have enough time for the AG to go back over the agreement. Again, they've already seen it. It has been reviewed before. They approved the signatories work. We can waste a lot of time sending it back to do it again, but that's what it would be, is a waste of time. And the people that need to sign it are the ones that are currently on that signature sheet. And if we don't move forward on it, it will have consequences.
Are there any other public comments?
Yes, there are actually some technical edits I would recommend. First, my recommendation is don't put dollar figures into this agreement because project costs change over time, and so putting specific dollar figures doesn't make a lot of sense. Having a percentage of the project makes a lot more sense because that kind of carries and covers every project possible. With that said, there are some changes I recommend as part of the percentages that are shown in here. The first one is the second bullet under 6.6.1, where it says changes constitute a change greater than 75%. My recommendation is change it to say greater than or equal to 75%. So then you can say, okay, if we have a project that is an actual 75% change, that's a major amendment. Or if you don't want that, then you can change it to say the next section I'm going to talk about, 6.6.2, the very first paragraph where it says less than 75%, you can say less than or equal to 75%. But we also need to make an addition in there that gives it a range, 75 to 25% within the major, within the admin model. Because right now it just says less than 75%. But we also have staff changes that if it's less than 25%. So we need to add some language in there to get those percentages correct. So it's kind of up to whatever you guys think is best. But my recommendation is greater than or equal to 75% is a major amendment. And then greater than or equal to 25%, but less than 75% is an admin mod. And anything less than 75% is staff change. I apologize if that was confusing.
What is the 25 to 75% based upon?
I believe part of that came from the MOU that the DOT is working on right now for their STIP, because they have the same thing that the feds are saying of us, that
Right.
they need to have an agreement in place that kind of spells out some more of these admin mod major amendments. And they have a table in there that talks about 75% is this, 25% is this, 50% is this. We just kind of made it simple because they have a whole range, 4 different ranges that are for different costs. So a project that costs $5 million, if it's 50% of that, it would do this. And it's incredibly confusing, and I don't know how they're going to be able to do anything with it. So we tried to just kind of simplify it into this, but use those same ranges because, they've been working with FHWA, and FHW seems to be okay with those kind of ranges. So we figured it'd be easy to do with this one.
I'm just looking at it from a standpoint of, we got a project in there for $1 million, 3 years from now, right? So it's in there for $1 million, and technically you come along with, it's probably closer to 1.2. So we go and we make the administrative change. And then 6 months later, we're like, it's probably close to 1.7. We're not gonna change it again. And so we keep doing these rolling changes below the 75% to keep out of the major amendment. Where is the backstop for that?
people in this room that have to approve all of it?
You and the policy committee?
I think that would be our job up here, to know that it keeps coming back. I mean, there's tons of projects that do that already through the.
I know, and that's, yeah.
Yeah, that's the hard part, is in our actual, we have in here that anything that's under construction is kind of automatically approved if an increase happens.
So construction, if there's construction overruns, that's not gonna get held up. This is if it's, okay.
That'd be like, so like a study would be the one you'd have to worry about if it comes back and doubles in price, but that's a significant change in the cost, the project cost, if it, in terms of catching the small incremental changes, that rare, that doesn't really happen with studies too much.
Right.
So.
Okay.
Any other public comments? All right, hearing none, matter last for debate.
Can I ask about a potential course of action?
Yes.
I think I'm feeling under pressure because of the potential need to go ahead and move forward at this admin modification. And I'm wondering if it's possible at this point in time to kind of go ahead and that pressure is weighing heavily on this decision. And we do have staff that will soon be presenting the admin modification action item. Is it possible that that move forward here, and that might shed a little bit more light on the need for action right now? I don't know how procedurally we would be able to go ahead and do such a thing, or if that's possible.
Well, I haven't made a motion on this item yet. We have been discussing it. If you rearrange the agenda this time.
Didn't do it. Do you want to put a motion on the floor and then go further in discussion on it?
We put a motion on the table, just table this and move on to that.
I move to table this action item until after our later in this meeting.
I want to say after item 5C.
Yes.
I'll second that.
Are there any objections to that motion? Okay. This will be tabled until after item 5C. Now we're on item 5C, which is the 2019-2022 TIF administrative modification number 2.
You have the memo and the tables before you.
This is about you.
All right. So there are some changes. Again, these are relatively minor in scope here. Some changes to table 2. We have some cost overruns in the Abbott Road, O'Malley Road and Abbott Road rehab, and we're balancing the program related to pavement replacement. You see that on the front cover of the memo here in red, the dollar figure differences. It's a $3 million increase in the O'Malley Road reconstruction, which I believe, I don't remember what phase that is.
For construction.
Construction phase, okay. That's a project that was here when I got here in this table. Usually projects take 7 to 10 years. This one's taken at least 16, if not more. So that's a $3 million cost override in the construction. Abbott Road, you see there was 0 in there in 2019, so we're putting some money in there for that one. In the pavement replacement, it was originally 6.6. On paper here, we show 4.4. We're actually reducing that by $350,000. That's my amendment here on the floor. I want to suggest, because we determined that's what we need for that pavement replacement program this year, and we're suggesting to move that $350,000 over to replacement buses for transit to utilize this year. They can use it this year, and they have the match to use it. So and we don't need it in that payment replacement right now.
So that would reduce that from 4.4 to
4050, yeah.
Okay, just making sure.
More than 50,000. So that's that. In Table 3, this is another amendment that is not listed on this because we just discovered this. As we're trying to obligate this particular project, the whole program, but this particular project, we have a design hit. It's in Table 3. It's exactly the Potomarsh improvements. There was a $250,000 design hit in 2019. We need to move that into 2020. As we're working with Fish and Game, we nominated this project for DNR to move this thing forward. They have, there's some misconceptions about what the federal program can pay for and what it cannot pay for. One of the things in the original project scope was the extension of a boardwalk, and these funds cannot be used for purely recreational purposes. They used to be able to used for that purpose, so when we did the Potomarsh project in 2003, 4, 5 timeframe, we could work on that, and we had some funding from ConocoPhillips to do the boardwalk, but this boardwalk is just, it dead ends into a viewing platform, but it doesn't connect to another trail, so you can't use these federal funds for that purpose. In discussions with ConocoPhillips, they've agreed that they will come up with some funds for design. Well, they've agreed that they will look into doing that, so it's not, the Fish and Game is going to apply for grants to get that money. Bottom line is, we're going to move the money from 2019 to 2020 in hopes that their proposal is successful and they'll get money for the boardwalk, and they'll get money for the boardwalk that's part of the mailbox. Mailbox is moving them down there, and for some of the other construction work. But we need to move it out of 2019 because they can't get it done in time here. That money that is going to be moved out of 2019 is also going over to the replacement process. So the total is that 350, so 600,000. That was in 2019 that was moved on to lessons. That one I just described is not on the memo because we just figured that out just a few days ago. And the memo, all the business items were posted in advance. On the next page of the memo, you have the plans and studies. We had $250,000 in there for the Port of Alaska multimodal improvement study. The state, I believe, after looking at what was needed on that, requested an increase of $150,000 up to $400,000 for what really would need to be done on that. And in doing the research on the TDM study for the UMed district, just really determined that the $750,000 is just really more than what is needed. So we're suggesting a reduction down to $500,000. It should still be able to do a very robust project with enough public involvement to satisfy what is needed to get that done well. So those are the suggestions in that. And then on the last page, or the last part of this table 5, the CMAC, that multimodal trip planner and smartphone application, my understanding is that the public transit department is not really able to have someone dedicated to manage that project. That's that Link AK. And so they're asking that we reduce that and take it out because they're no longer going to support that. So those are the changes that we're asking for in this administrative modification. Hope I didn't make it too confusing. I probably did. As Bart said, it's my fault.
One quick clarification. For the TDM study, the reason it's being reduced is because of limited match for that project. We could only get enough in-kind match for $500,000 versus the $750,000, so that's why we're reducing it down.
That's a better way of saying it. That's my turn.
Yeah, I'll launch into this one. My question is pretty simple. Which of these cannot move forward with the existing operating agreement for these changes? Or run the risk, I would say.
What do you mean? If we don't, his question is, if we don't act on item 5B today, which of these items run the risk of having headquarters say, no, those aren't admin mods?
I don't
all of
think- Yeah, it's not any of the specific ones. It's just the idea of you're doing an amendment. You're doing some change to your tip. without some specifics in your operating agreement that reflect this. When we did the 2019 to 22 tip, they held it for 3 months to tell us, we don't like how you're doing your amendments. They don't meet with the MOU that we have scripted that's in there that governs the MPOs. Now, it doesn't, but that was their take on it. And they basically said, we're not going to approve this until you change that. And it took us 3 to 4 months to get them to finally accept that approving the tip. I mean, even as late as it was approved, we're still challenged to get this program out this year. And you can see what we're trying to do, moving things around. So it's not a specific project that won't go through. It's every single thing, because they'll take the whole thing and say, we're not approving it until you change your procedures. It's the whole program.
For clarification, then, the issue is that there was no description of any admin modification process. So any change to the tip was
Well, the previous version of the operating agreement basically just said, minor amendments are, things that just might change the parameters of the project, things of that nature, and if you're adding a new project, that's it. It didn't specifically call out adding a new project not inside your allocation or outside your allocation. Our practice has been, if it's in the AMATS allocation, it's an amendment. If you can add anything you want to the railroads projects, to the NHS, to HSIP, to Transit's FTA funds, and that's always an administrative modification because it's not part of allocation. That wasn't clarified in the language here in the operating agreement. That's what they're really, that's the crux of it.
Other questions?
I have one, table 4. So between the original one, which was $1 million total, we've now, with the changes and modifications, we're down to 900,000. So there's 100,000.
Well, they're not, the allocation is, that's just how much was in that particular table. And I think that money was moved over into the roadway table, but I'm not positive, but it's the allocation is spread over all of the AMATS tables, the roadway, the non-motorized, the CMAC plans and studies. So we just try to get it balanced. The total dollar figure, 29,360,000 is what's spread out. So it doesn't mean there's always going to be that 1 million in that table. It's just between those two projects, that's it.
And then, like table 2, the roadway, when you look at the total amount for 2019, that number actually went up. So it's the allocation, like I said, just around the total program that has to be balanced, not the individual tables. Any other questions? Are there any public comments on this item?
Thank you. Table 2, under Safety Improvement Program for Traffic Count Support, we've been notified by our highway data section that $150,000 that's normally obligated to the state's traffic count program will not be requested this year. So there's funds there that are either absorbed by the MOA traffic count program or can be reallocated somewhere else.
Yeah, I did have a discussion with Kim Carpenter, who has the safety section, and she let me know that. She basically said, we're not gonna need that support for our traffic counts anymore. And I asked her if the municipality needed that, and would they be able to have the match to cover all that, et cetera. And she said, yes, they would. So it makes sense to me to continue to leave that in the safety improvement program to the traffic count support. We got the match to cover that, so we really are spent there.
Awesome.
So we left it there.
On table 3, for the Tudor Road pathway connection, there was originally $100,000 programmed for 19. It's been zeroed out. And my conversations with project managers, they have confirmed with Parks that they have match availability for that $100,000 and will be obligating it. Just curious as to why it was zeroed out.
That actually project should not have been put in the tip to begin with. It was not made clear by Parks that the Chugach Foothill Connector Phase 2 project was going to include that little segment. So it's basically a connection from the new Chugach Foothill connectors to the Regal Mountain Drive connection through there. When they submitted their original nomination, they didn't include that in there, but I talked to Juan Lee, who's working on it, and she said that they are going to do it. So technically, we don't need that money for that particular one, but we left some funding in here for construction in case the Chugach Foothills connector later on needed some additional funding.
That's the TAP funded project.
Yes, the TAP funded project is the Chugach Foothill Connector Phase 2, sorry.
So they didn't need the design for this project, but it's in there, so when the TAP funded project moves forward to construction, if they need the additional construction funding, it's there, it's kind of a placeholder.
I don't think that was
2021.
conveyed to the DOT project manager. He was expecting to put a PDA in for that funding.
It's not an actual project, so I guess maybe the managers need to talk to each other about what's needed, because I guess we're getting different stories then.
Is there anything else? That was all my comments. Thank you.
Any other public comment?
In light of the fact that there's a change to the traffic count support program, on table 2, there may be a recommendation to change the description, because right now it says that it's going to be collect traffic data within the AMATS area completed by DOT Central Region Highway Data Section and MOA Traffic Department section. If that funding, are we anticipating this is going to be long-term? They won't need it at all?
No, they've indicated that 2021, they will be in their allocation.
Okay, sounds good. Sorry, that was just clarification. And just so you guys know, when looking at the memo with all the changes that are going on, every change we're making falls within the new admin mod changes that we have in the operating agreement recommendation, except for one, and that's the O'Malley Road rehabilitation overrun. And the reason is because there is no funding in there right now. So if we add $500,000, that's a... I'm not sure how to...
Anything times 0 is 0, so...
So, because what we have in the admin, or the change for the operating agreement is 75% of the total project cost of all phases shown within the approved TIP. So I'm not sure how that's going to be handled.
So if it's project phase, it would be construction, right? So would you add in 2020 and 2020 says utilities and construction?
This is for Abbott Road rehabilitation. They only need 500 for the current construction.
Gotcha.
So I'm not sure how that's going to be handled.
Is it amount?
Oh, sorry. Abbott Road rehabilitation.
Okay.
The 500,000 for that in 19. So that's the only one that's kind of in question, which might be a good opportunity to kind of run this through and see how it goes and see what changes we need to make.
So is that, okay, I'm just clarifying, so there was no money allocated in 2019 for the Abbott Road rehabilitation, which in the memo is missing a T on Abbott. But is that a construction, that $500,000, is that a construction overrun?
Yes.
All right. Okay, so is that project complete after this, correct? Or at least that?
Unless they need more money.
Yeah, it was in the previous tip.
Okay.
It's a grandfathered project.
Yeah, it is.
So I don't know if there's something we can put into our operating agreement about grandfathered projects, being exempt from this or something, but honestly, coming back a second time and making additional changes to the operating agreement isn't the worst thing in the world. Not getting it done in the first place might be. And so it might be good to say, okay, do these kind of hand in hand and then see what comes out of it. That's all.
Any other public comments?
move to approve. Amendment, admin modification numbers is two.
We'll recommend approval of the policy committee. Okay. Moved by Mr. Post. Do I have a second? Seconded by Mr. Alini. Yes,
Do we
Mr.
need to add in to move to the transit bus replacement stuff that's not in the memo as part of this?
I would suggest that, yeah.
So your motion include the laid on the table items?
Yes.
And is the second okay with the laid on the table items? Okay. Are there any objections to recommending approval to the admin modification with the laid on the table items discussed today? All right. With that, we are so moved. So we are now back to item 5B, and I have a question. Because we've discussed this, opened it for public comment, and now are back to this, do we have to open it to public comment again, or have we concluded public comment?
You can reopen it if you'd like to, if there should be more comment.
I just,
Well,
I didn't know.
yeah.
Thank you. So, we are back to the operating agreement update. Is there any more? Okay. Yes.
If we move this forward to the policy committee, I would strongly recommend that we concurrently send it to legal, at least for the municipality. Even if we've been doing it one way in the past, I think we may be doing it wrong, and they could come back and tell us that you've been doing this wrong. So I'd like to find out one way or the other who has the authority for signature.
Are you making a motion?
Huh?
Considering you making a motion?
I'll make that motion.
So you're recommending,
I'll start with recommending forward this to the policy committee for approval, while concurrently sending this to the appropriate legal departments to determine who has the legal authority to make amendments on this. And sign for it. Sign it legal.
got a motion from Mr. Hanson, do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Ms. Long. Are there any objections? Hearing none, we are so moved. All right, that actually concludes our action items. We are now on to project and plan updates. And we have 6A, the 2040 NTP update.
I'm sorry, I guess I was a little slow on the update there. But so we didn't make any changes to the potential issue of grandfather projects in the construction phase. We didn't make any changes to the project references that might occur in Appendix A, so that we can go ahead and leave that option open. And I guess we can go ahead and try and address that later on if indeed it's determined it's just a policy committee action. Okay. All right.
Thank you. Okay. Do we have a 2040 NTP update today?
Just a quick one. Thank you, Madam Chair. On the 27th, the policy committee released for public review and comment for 30 days.
This is the Android direction.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. The AMATS draft preferred alternative list of projects. And so far, we've gotten 4 comments, 2 of which were just asking about a definition of something. So we will be doing a comment response summary, and we'll bring that back to you, and then get it approved hopefully by the policy committee, and then we'll be working on the public review draft for the MTP. Well, we've been working on it.
Yeah.
Our goal is to have that in the fall, late fall.
Thank you. And then the obligation report.
All right. So, maybe some of you have not seen these obligation reports before, but basically we're required to.
I don't think we have it.
It's not in the-
No, it's not on there. It needs to be
Some-
paper copy.
It's not, you got it.
Sorry.
I'll just play with this for a while. There are a few copies over there.
You may have to share because there's only one copy left.
I have one.
Okay. So you may have to share.
Don't make copies.
You can go make comments.
Take an hour and a half. Somebody have an extra.
Wanted to see mine.
And you guys can take mine. Okay, you guys have enough?
Yeah.
Here you go.
These are your notes, you want your notes?
Yeah, don't take that, please. I'll grab it from you.
Okay.
And not enter the notes into the record. Sorry. So, here's the obligation report that some of you have. Basically, every quarter, we're supposed to show how we're doing, and we have in our operating agreement how the percentages you have to be within your obligation. Obviously, sometimes you're going to be a little over, a little bit under, et cetera, et cetera. By the end of the year, you have to be exactly obligating what you have allocated. And so I think we're tracking fairly well. We have some changes that we need to make, or that are going to be, they're reflected in here. Basically, what you have is column B shows what was in the approved tip. That's what we said we were going to obligate. We said we were going to obligate $500,000 for O'Malley Road reconstruction. If you look over at D, column D, you'll see that, well, we did need more. We talked about that in the administrative modification, that there was a cost overrun for the construction. So I believe this should actually say additional, oh no, this is correct. This is the actual anticipated obligation, 3.5 million. It was 500,000, we need an additional 3, so the total that needs to be obligated is 3.5. Yeah, so that's basically how this creature works. You look at the column B, which shows you what we planned on, and then if there's any additional that's needed. If you look at it, you'll see column C is also shows what has actually been obligated so far. So in this particular roadway category, we've obligated $400,000 of the Glen Highway Integrated Corridor Management Study, $465,000 of the Safety Improvement Program. That's what's been obligated so far. We have basically to the end of August. If something hasn't moved, then it's going to slip. Fiscal year ends September 30th, but obviously it takes time to get the paperwork done through the state and the Fed. So at this point in July, we have just a few short weeks to get the rest of this money obligated. That $13 million obligated. So part of why we were really getting a little wound up about not getting this stuff done. So the O'Malley Road, as I mentioned, is additional $3 million to cover the additional construction costs. There's the Abbott Road, additional $500 for some minor cost overruns with very big project. On the second page, you have non-motorized projects. And so in the non-motorized category, I talked about the Potter Marsh improvements and how that's not going to go through this year. And we're going to continue that project to make sure it works, but it'll be slipped into 2020. In addition, the Anchorage Area Pathway and Trails replacement, $1.2 million, and $300,000 is the extent of what they're expecting that they can do with that pavement replacement on the trails this year. So that's a little difference, but that's what we have showing there. Otherwise, things are moving along there. Studies and plans, same sort of thing. That large chunk of the Seward Highway to Glen Highway PEL study, we expect to obligate that very soon. The PDA has been submitted, so it's a big project, but we're thankful that we're going to get that out the door, at least obligated this year. And then I talked about the additional funding needed at the Port of Alaska multimodal improvement study. That basically is an increase in funds for more public review and stakeholder engagement. So that's kind of the dollar figures there. I believe, for the most part, everything else is moving. You can see we're doing fairly well in the CMAC category, moving that along. The last page, we talked about where we are for the total overall. We need to be within plus or minus 5% of what we had off a tip, and we're just a little under 2.46%. So other than that, between James and I'm here to answer your questions on the office report.
I have a question related to the admin mod we just did. So you have the O'Malley and the Abbott numbers in here. Do you have the transit fleet replacement in here? Or
We
is it
don't,
not?
because we just found out about that.
Okay.
We just determined
So
that
this will be
today.
updated to reflect those laid on the table items as
Yeah.
well? Okay. Sorry, it's the very last thing on that page, so it's
Yeah,
easy to
yeah,
catch.
yeah, yeah.
Didn't have the number. Are there any other questions?
And it's just an informational item. I'm not asking for approval. It's just
Yeah, I know.
informational. Okay.
I just was asking if there's any questions. I just realized I didn't ask for any public comments on the last item, but it was a very short update. Are there any public comments on this item? I clicked. Okay. All right, is there any general information for the good of the order? It's July, it's no longer hot right now. We need more rain. Like, that's my general information for the good of the order. All right, any committee comments?